Hi, I'm Tiffany, and this is Towering TBR. Okay, today I am here to talk about all of the books I read in the month of April. I was participating in Aurelium Magical Readathon all month long, and I have since vlogged the entire experience. So if I talk about any of the books briefly and you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts, I will leave these linked in the description below so that you can get more information. But I know not everybody watches the vlogs, and I wanted to have a video for people who maybe just don't have as much time to watch everything. Okay, I am going to start with the DNFs first. I have been kind of in a reading slump towards the second half, and so I DNF'd these three just because I wasn't in the right mood for them. But I DNF'd The Picture of Dorian Gray. I also DNF'd Great Expectations and Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. So all of those were just not fast-paced enough for me right now. So I'm hoping to maybe pick them up in the future. I read a mix of manga, comics, novels, and a memoir. So I'm going to start with the illustrated stuff first and then go on to the novels and the memoir. First comic I want to talk about is Beautiful Darkness by Fabien Vehlmann. This art is exquisite. It's so beautiful and creepy and macabre, and I love the art. However, there is no story. So it starts out with these little people, like these tiny inch-tall people, and all of a sudden their ceiling starts to cave in, but we realize their ceiling is part of a human body that is now dead and decomposing. There really is no thread. They sort of just like leave the corpse and like walk around the woods. That's about it. There was no story. So I gave it 2 stars because I thought the art was beautiful, but I wish it had had some sort of theme to tie it together. Another comic I picked up was The Many Deaths of Laila's Star by Ram V. This was a comic about death. She finds out that her job is being made redundant because there's a human who was just born and he is going to invent immortality. And so she is let go and given a mortal body and sent to Earth. It's kind of confusing as to why this happens when the child is born because he hasn't invented immortality yet and people do continue to die. So I'm like, who's doing her job? I don't really know. Basically, it's this story of death and her many interactions and ways that her life intertwine with this human who will invent immortality. And we learn why he wants to invent it. And I just really thought the story was good and really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I would love for this to be a series so I can get like a bit more clarity on what all was happening. I picked up a romance called Chef's Kiss by Jarett Melendez. And this is so cute. So this boy is named Ben Cook, and he and his friends have just graduated college, and they're moving in together and getting their first grown-up jobs. Ben is interested in reading and literature and has an English major, and he wants to get a job in publishing or something related to his degree. But everybody keeps saying, oh, you don't have any experience. We don't want you. So he starts to get a little bit panicky and frustrated and walks by a restaurant that says, no experience necessary. And so he decides he is going to basically interview for this role. He gets like a trial period of 3 weeks and works with the different chefs to learn the signature dishes of the restaurants and to try and put his own spin on it. And while he's doing this, he falls for one of the chefs named Liam. And they have this cute romance, and his friend group is also really supportive, and I just loved it. I thought it was really fun. I would say don't look to this as like realistic restaurant experience because that's not, it's not at all accurate. It's mostly these characters hanging out and cooking things. So I really enjoyed it and would recommend if that sounds good to you. I then read my favorite comic this month, Zita the Space Girl by Ben Hatke. I gave this 4.5 stars. It is so sweet. Zita and Thomas are these kids and they're playing around in a field. They come across a crater and in the crater is a giant red button. Zita presses the button and a wormhole opens and a creature from the other side kidnaps Thomas. And you can see that she's like devastated, but she decides she's going to push the button again and hop in and go to save her friend. There is all sorts of creatures and aliens and robots, and some are helpful and some are not. And it's the sweet story. The art is incredibly silly and playful, and this was just an utter joy to read. I loved it so much. I did find out when we ended on a bit of a cliffhanger that there are 2 more books in this trilogy. So I am going to be probably snagging those soon because this was so fun. The last illustrated book is this manga, Witch Hat Atelier, Volume 2. This follows on directly after book 1. We start out with a very compelling chase, and we get to learn more about the world and the different types of magic and artifacts, and we kind of get to start seeing some personality between the 4 apprentices. While we're primarily following Coco, we get to learn basically other attitudes towards magic, and it was really compelling, really fast-paced, and I'm excited to pick up the 3rd one soon. Switching on to the memoir, I read Finding Me by Viola Davis. This starts out great. It won an audiobook award, and so I listened to her narrate her own book. The audiobook is great. If you're going to read this book, that's a good way to do it. So in the beginning, she starts with talking about how she grew up in a poverty-stricken household, how her father was violent and abusive, and she talks about getting into school and making connections, and the first third of the book is really interesting. It definitely has a story, narrative arc. And then around the second third to second half, basically, she just starts talking about her jobs. And it felt like a list. It felt like she didn't want to rock the boat, so she didn't really say anything except for like a list of facts. I wanted to DNF at 77% because I was so utterly bored. I felt like when she was talking about her jobs, not only was it list-like, but it was also felt really inauthentic because she kept saying things like, everybody was great, nobody had any egos, there was no trouble with any people on the set. And I mean, maybe that's how it was for her, but it felt disingenuous, and I basically forced myself to finish. So I gave it 2 stars because I actively didn't want to listen to it anymore. I picked up a thriller with a sci-fi twist called Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This was awesome. So the premise is that this woman, Jen, she's waiting for her 18-year-old son to come home. And while she's waiting up, she sees him outside, but she sees him in a confrontation with a man, and her son stabs the man. She runs out and tries to save him, but he dies. And her son is taken by the police, and he is arrested, and she goes home not really knowing what she's going to do. And when she wakes up the next morning, it's actually the morning of the stabbing. She's actually gone backwards in a time loop. She rationalizes that she has to find a way to prevent the murder, and then that will fix the time loop. And this was fast-paced. This was fun. I loved the sci-fi element of the time loop. And backwards is also something I really haven't seen. So I thought it was great. I gave it 5 stars. The intrigue held up the entire way. And she's got a new book coming out in May, and I am going to put my name on the wait list because I'm excited. I don't hardly ever give thrillers 5 stars. So this was a rare exception, and I'm excited to pick up more from her. I also read the book Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Pelt. This was a multi-perspective about this elderly woman named Tova and her relationship with Marcellus, a giant Pacific octopus. She is a cleaner at the aquarium, and she gets to kind of have this relationship with Marcellus. He will escape his cage, and she won't narc on him. It's super cute. And there's another perspective of another guy who is the substitute cleaner, and how his story is woven in. It's definitely magical realism. I thought it was contemporary, but there are way too many coincidences for that to be the case. But I liked it. I saw it as a little bit predictable, but I enjoyed it, and I thought that it's quite popular, and for good reason. I did see it compared to A Man Called Uva by Frederick Bachman, and I definitely get those vibes. So if you're a person who liked that book and you're thinking about checking this one out, I would recommend it. I read the book Of Women and Salt by Gabriella Garcia. This was a buddy read with a friend, Chattie, at the Mad Chatter. I will link her down in the description below. This was a really beautifully written intergenerational story focusing on women in Cuba and Florida. The writing blew me away. It was so descriptive, but not in an overly written type of way. However, I felt like we only got glimpses of these characters, and while I appreciate that she was trying to give an overview of this entire generations of women, I would have liked it to be more focused on one or two characters, and maybe weave in a little bit of the other stuff as backstory. I just felt like there were too many threads, and I didn't have enough time with any one character to really get attached. I did like the ending. I thought that did tie some of it together.
That rug really tied the room together, did it not?
And I will definitely be on the lookout whenever she writes another book, because I gave that 3.5 stars and would recommend. The last book that I read that I don't have is The House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson. This is a middle grade fantasy, also recommended by Chattie, and it is focused on the Baba Yaga myth, which is a Russian folktale. And in this story, we're following Marinka. She's a 12-year-old girl who lives with her grandma, and her grandma is a Yaga, a guardian who helps the dead cross over. She lives in a house made of chicken legs, and that means that her house can up and leave at any time it wants to, and if it feels like it needs to protect the secrecy. So she's really struggling to make friends. She basically just has her grandma and the dead people that are crossing over. Not any long-term quality friends that way. So something happens that kind of pushes her into her fate, and she does a lot of things trying to prevent it, but ultimately succeeds. I enjoyed it, but I definitely think it's better for children. I know that there are adults who can read middle grade, and it can hit both for kids and for adults. But this one, I think, especially with the angst, I think is more for kids. If you're an adult and you still want to read it, go for it. It was a fun book to read. I picked up Babylon's Ashes, which is the 6th book in the Expanse series. This was incredibly fast-paced. We got to see a lot of the building tensions between the different factions in the earlier books, and it all kind of comes to a head in this book. And I picked this up because I told you I was feeling a little bit slumpy, and I wanted something really heavy on plot. And this was a great choice. It had constant battles and other things going on, and it was just go, go, go. I did feel disappointed with the ending. This is where the show ends, and they are kind of tidying up some of the longer term story arcs. But I wasn't quite happy with how they did that. It felt a little bit ex machina. I'm going to keep reading this book series and would highly recommend it if you like long space operas. I picked up Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I read this because this was one of my bingo pulls for a book I wanted to read last year, and I finally got to it now. This opens up, and we follow Piranesi, and he lives in this massive house with many halls and windows and corridors, and it seems never ending. There are tides and oceans that go on inside the house, and it just seems to be its own world. Piranesi lives there with one other person who he calls the other, and they are working together to try to uncover some secrets. Piranesi is very ignorant and naive. He doesn't know a lot about what's going on, and so as the reader, we are also confused. It finally explains what's going on around the 80% mark, and I was disappointed with this ending as well. As we are getting more information from Piranesi, I was constantly making predictions and guesses, and I came up with the ending as a possibility, but then I disregarded it because I thought, oh, no, it's going to be twistier than that. And I don't know why I thought it would be twisty. I had super high expectations, but overall, this was like a 4-star book, and then the ending made me drop it down to a 3.5. I would still recommend it, but if you don't like being confused, maybe not this one. I would recommend it if you like magical realism and fantasy and don't mind being confused for most of the book. And the last book I read this month was Happy Place by Emily Henry. I was lucky enough to be able to get first in line on this because it just came out. And this follows a group of 6 friends. There is a couple within the group that we're focused on, Harriet and Wynne. They've been together for like several years, 9 or 10 years, but they've actually just broken up a few months ago. And they get a chance to go to their summer house for the very last time. It's being sold by the relative who owns it, and this is their last hurrah to get together and have this big summer bash. So for that and other reasons, they decide that they're going to pretend to still be together. But this is really hard on Harriet because she doesn't even know why they broke up. He dumped her in a 4-minute phone call that she mentions. It's difficult on them to pretend they're together, especially because they're around their best friends who know them well. However, the friends are also hiding some secrets as well. I found the character work really strong. I liked each of the characters and they felt authentic and well-rounded. I liked the couple together. We get alternating chapters of this big last summer blowout and then how they met and got together and their past and all that. And they have this quick, witty banter between them. It's very sarcastic. Sometimes it's really dark. And I just love them together. And the whole time I was like, why aren't they together anymore? We don't have a reason for this. And that's where it kind of strayed into not feeling very believable. One, that nobody told, like none of them told their friends. That doesn't make sense, in my opinion. 2, a lot of what they broke up for was miscommunication, and it felt contrived. Even though some of their problems were real, it wasn't so much their problems with the fact that they just wouldn't talk about them. And I know that can be realistic, but it felt contrived in this situation and made it less enjoyable. However, I wanted something happy. I wanted something to distract me and to meet some characters that I would find memorable, and that did the job. I'm giving this 3.5 stars, and it's a perfectly fine romance. I think if you don't mind the miscommunication trope, maybe this will even be 5 stars for you. I enjoyed it, and it was nice to have a little bit of romance, a little bit of something that wasn't super sad. Okay, those are all the books I read in the month of April. So I did not complete all of the prompts for the Archmage. I had a really difficult month with my health and decided that, to me, the enjoyable part of reading was more important than the crossing off tasks on a list. So I failed, and that's okay. It is the first time that I have not made it, and I just have to accept my limitations sometimes. But I do plan to continue and hope it goes really well in August. Let me know if you're planning on participating in this readathon. Either you already are or you want to participate in August. Tell me what was your favorite or least favorite book you read. Let's have a chat down in the comments below. Thanks.